What's up, data transformers? This is Bolaji, and welcome to Data Careers Transformations, the show where we watch analytics engineers, data engineers, data analysts, and data scientists transform their careers. Today, we're talking to a data engineer who crafts delectable data sets across industries and tech stacks. Oh, you're going to see. She started out in biotech, building automation applications and analytics pipelines for research teams. More recently, she helped define the platform function at DBT Labs. And now she's working as a senior data engineer at the Shopify. Here's what you don't know about her, though. She used to be a marine biologist, okay? Super smart. She used to make costumes for her drama department's theatrical productions. What? Super creative. And she's played over 1,000 hours in Nintendo's Splatoon 3. Are we gonna need an intervention? We gotta hear about that. Please help me welcome the lady who's learning to do handstands as we speak from Portland, Oregon, USA. Help me welcome Elize Papineau. What's up, Elize?
Wow, I feel like you need an applause for that intro. That was incredible.
That is all you. How are you doing all the things? You are a Renaissance woman. I have never heard this combination of hobbies, interests, and skills. Okay, we got to get into the costume design. So this is not something you hear every day. You're a seamstress?
Not currently, though I was for probably like the first 20 years of my life. My aunt and my grandma taught me to sew when I was really young. And in like middle and high school, I actually made almost all my clothes. And so in university, my kind of like university job was making costumes in the drama department at my school. And it was really fun. And they had a really legit drama department. So I got to learn a lot about how those kind of things are run. And it was a really wonderful experience. I was the only person studying science in there too. So I felt like it was nice.
One of these is not like the other. My gosh, what are some of the productions, Elize, that they put on?
Oh gosh, that's embarrassing. I don't know the answer to that anymore. It was a while ago.
You were strictly behind the curtain, working on the outfits.
Yeah, we were busy.
I get it. And the handstands, I'm super jealous. I've always wanted to be able to do one. I'm not that coordinated. How do you learn handstands as an adult?
Okay, that's a great question. And the answer is really just to try, right? So nobody comes with these skills.
Okay.
And
fair.
That's the thing that when you go to a class, they kind of emphasize is like, just keep trying. Just do it 5-10 minutes every day that you have the opportunity to.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been taking classes on and off for handstands for about 6 months, and I'm almost able to do it off the wall. So
that is brilliant. That is brilliant. Good for you. I think I need to add that to my bucket list. It's not on my bucket list because I figured I'd never be able to do it. But Elize is giving me the belief.
You can do it. Yeah. All you need is the dedication. You can do anything.
So Elize, you've got this super eclectic background, and I mean that in the best of ways. I'm always intrigued by people's origin stories. Folks might know by now I'm a super nerdy about comic books and origin stories. And the story of Elize, people who see you now, senior data engineer at Shopify, doing big things at DBT Labs before that, they might not know that you were tutoring biology and chemistry in college. Like, these two do not meet. How did you start there and get into data?
Yeah, it actually was kind of a really slow burn. Like to me, it's like quite a spectrum when you look in the past. So, when I finished my bachelor's degree, I went into a grad program at a marine institute in San Francisco, and I was doing a type of research which is called transcriptomics. Transcriptomics looks at how organisms use their genome. So we have all this data stored in our genome, but you only actually use a fraction of it, and you use it differently in different conditions at different times in your life. So we were looking at what it's called gene expression. We were looking at that. And to do that type of analysis, you had to learn some computer programming. And so I started learning to program in a language called R, which is very popular for statistics types work. And lots of transcriptomic software packages are written and available in R. And just got way more interested in that type of work than like sitting in a fridge and pipetting for like 6 to 8 hours a day. As much fun as that was too. Like I definitely look back at that time in my life very fondly, got a lot of really unique experiences. Like you got to see a lot of different types of crabs.
A lot of crabs.
A lot of
A lot of crabs.
crabs. Yeah.
Are you actually able to eat crab? Are you a fan of crab on the dish, or is it more?
I am. I'm a huge fan of crab, and I think it's one of the few animals that like that animal would want you to eat it because you want.
Really?
You see videos of crabs fighting, they are ruthless. They will just rip off one of their broken limbs and go back in. So I think the crab would respect that, like we won and now I'm eating it.
We are getting into crab psychology here. I did not expect that turn. This is cool. This is cool. And so thank you for that. By the way, Elise, I recently read a fiction book. This is a rabbit hole, folks. But I recently read a fiction book. I'm into sci-fi, and there's this author named Blake Crouch. He writes wonderful sci-fi stories about near future. So he's taking technology that exists now and projecting a little bit. But he wrote a book called Upgrade. And in it, it's about genetic engineering, some scary stuff. But he talked about gene expression, and I'm like, dang, I need to share this book with Elise. There might be some of the stuff that she learned. Maybe she could give me crab superpowers or something. I don't know.
Maybe. It's been a while since I've been in the lab though, full disclosure. But I would love to check that out. I'm actually getting really into science fiction right now. So sounds
Very
like a good
cool.
project.
I will shoot that over to you. I listen to a lot of books on Audible, so I'll send you a link. But let's sort of see if we can connect the dots, or you can connect the dots for us, Elise. You started out in the biology world. You started to do some statistics related work. You learned R, started getting more interested in data. At a certain point, you actually broke through and got yourself a position at Data Climber, a data consultancy. I don't know if that was your first data job.
So it was my first job that you would call a data job, but it was not my
Okay.
first job like working with data. My kind of roles in biotech started in the lab and then really like kind of bridged into writing software to basically automate my job away. And
Nice.
then that company that I worked at for about 3 or 4 years went through a series of acquisitions and ended up getting shut down by one of the
Mm,
folks who acquired it.
mm.
And that gave me kind of the opportunity to jump into like tech or working in data full time.
I love that. There's often been folks who've shared on this show the difficulty sometimes of breaking into that first data job. And so I'm really interested. Some of the folks have said it's serendipity, being in the right place at the right time. For others, it's relationships. And a third group of folks have said it's almost domain knowledge, like already having some experience in a certain area and then kind of adding the data expertise to that.
It is extremely tricky. And I think that like hiring and interviewing in tech in general is its whole own skill that sometimes we
Mm,
don't honor as like it being a independent skill that we don't just acquire through work.
wow.
That being said, for me specifically, it was very much kind of a fortunate being in the right place at the right time
Mm,
and having the connection to my boss at Data Climber as he was starting that business. And so that was pretty fortunate. And I will say at the time, one of the biggest struggles for me personally was even just understanding the job title that I was looking for.
really?
So it had probably been like a year and a half to 2 years of me applying
Mm,
for data scientist roles,
mm.
because that was the job title that I knew.
Okay.
But it wasn't until like I really understood that that isn't even the type of work I want to do. I'm not a very statistic happy person. That's not where I thrive.
Interesting. Yeah.
So especially like fast forwarding when DBT Labs started introducing this analytics engineering title, that was like a really powerful moment for me. And it even helped contextualize my past experience of like, there
Wow.
wasn't a word or there wasn't like a set
Wow.
of words, at least in my vernacular or at the time, to know the type of job I was looking for. And I think that was one of my
Mm,
biggest struggles because once I kind of found that area, it was a lot simpler.
that's wild. Really interesting. Really interesting. Okay, so Elise, you were able to work at Data Climber for about 3 years as a senior cloud data engineer. Very exciting. You then found your way into DBT itself, the Mecca. We've made it, Mama. We're here. And you worked in a few different areas, which I thought was super interesting. You were a senior analytics engineer with the professional services group. Same title, senior analytics engineer with ops and strategy. And then you were a senior data engineer. Would you regard yourself more as a data engineer or an analytics engineer?
Yeah, I definitely align more with the title of data engineer because I really kind of see myself as like a data plumber.
Okay.
to borrow some
Yes.
terminology from another industry.
Yes.
But I really love connecting like source systems to a database and getting that data in and doing it in a way that's observable, reliable, trustworthy, probably the
Mm,
biggest one.
mm.
And so I think that's the set of tasks we tend to assign to more data engineering titles. But I also really like the analytics engineering side of things, especially like that foundational, like get your data into your DBT framework, clean it up, tidy it up,
Mm,
make it something that people can use and trust.
mm.
And that's really the two set of skills that I think that you can count on me for.
I got you. I got you. I love that. Honestly, I love the self-awareness. And I don't know if you always had that or if you kind of arrived at that after trying a few different things in data. Like some people just sort of know they're 3 years old and like, Mom, I want to be a neurosurgeon. And you're like, can you even spell that? But for most of us, we have to wander a little bit. How long did it take you before you settled into your data personality?
That's a really good question. I would say, like, kind of once I landed my first true data job, only about 6 months to a year, because it really started to click for me how other parts of my
Mm,
personality really lent themselves to being effective at this type of work. So,
okay.
you highlighted the 1,000 hours in Splatoon 3. I'm
Splatoon.
also a crazy Pokemon Go player. I play a lot of Tetris 99. I just play a lot of games in
Nice,
general, but
nice,
when I
nice.
when I look at a game, I am always trying to figure out like the internal systems so I can kind of like min-max the bonuses and really play
Oh
these
my gosh.
systems like as effectively as and efficiently as possible.
Oh my gosh.
And I think that's actually like the skill of a data engineer, right? Is
Wow.
like getting in, figuring out like what does the inside of Salesforce look like? What do they call these things? How do I make sure I'm getting these things at the right time? That type of work. And so I
Hmm.
think it's just like once I kind of realized that overlap in personality, it really clicked for me. And I personally feel very fortunate to have a job that I can enjoy so much.
Yeah.
Cause I know that that's fairly rare.
That is so cool. That's goodness. That almost reminds me of Neo in the Matrix, like when he starts to see the code. Like you're playing a game and you're looking at the plumbing. You're trying to envision the infrastructure behind the game. What's the logic? But I've never done that, but that's also why I'm not a data engineer. That's not my superpower. That is fascinating.
Yeah, you're not actually the first person to say that either. That's a joke I have. That blonde, brunette, redhead scene where he can just see it. That's like a joke that my friends, they tease me about.
That's very, very cool. Okay, so I'm curious, Elise, and I want to get into the DBT portion of your story in just a little bit, just in terms of how you first discovered it. But before we go there, I think one piece career-wise that has stumped a lot of data professionals after they get that first data job and they're starting to build the technical skills, they're starting to get some projects under their belt, is transitioning to now the mid-level, mid-career type jobs where they've got the bigger titles, they've got more prestige, maybe they're shifting to a more prominent company. How do you think you were able to transition from a non-traditional background to starting in data and then getting these big titles at DBT Labs itself?
But that's a really wonderful question. A big part of it is just continuing to learn and never really being satisfied with the boundaries of your own knowledge. So we're in an age where a lot of our tools are open source, and that in
Yes.
itself is like a wealth of knowledge that we can kind of download and absorb over time.
Mhm.
But we also have, this information is all at our fingertips, really. And so for me, at least, I started out, I had really, really strong SQL skills, okay,
Okay.
Python skills, and okay, but probably not very good skills with R, which is not really
Yep.
relevant to our industry anyway. And for me, I just kind of like kept pushing and going deeper and deeper and trying to figure out the underlying tools. And that was one of
Mm.
the things that when I first saw DBT in like the ecosystem, I absolutely loved was I could ask a question about DBT. I could go read the docs. But if I wasn't satisfied with the understanding that I got from the docs, I can dive into the
Mm.
code itself and I can go answer my questions and
Hmm.
learn these mechanisms. And I think being able to do that self-sufficiently, but then also
Mhm.
know how to do that and how to teach that for yourself is how you can continue to grow your impact, which is traditionally what we see with these like larger titles, right? Is more impact on your organization.
Wow. Oh, I love the, oh, we're gonna dig into that. That's real meaty right there. Technically, I did notice in looking at your LinkedIn profile, Elise, you've got all the certifications. Like you've done all the things, BigQuery, Snowflake, Fivetran, AWS, Python, R, Looker, SnowPy. Good night. Like you've done it all. You almost, speaking of video games, it almost feels like you're collecting like the coins or like the gotta catch them all. You caught just about all the Pokemon skills there are to gain as a data professional. How did you prioritize when you first got started? What technologies to actually invest time into?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate that my first data job was a consulting role. So that did
Okay.
do a lot of the prioritization for me.
Okay.
Today I'm on this client. They have this data warehouse. They're using these BI tools. So now I need to be an expert in those. And the thing that I always say about that time and why it was so extremely valuable for me and in growing my career was I got to get really opinionated really quickly on the
Love it.
ecosystem of tools
I
that are
love it.
available to us. And this is
Yes.
extremely different from the experience you would have in a internal role. You would likely be hyper focusing on your own stack and your own
That's
specifications there.
true. That's true.
Yeah, I think that that was the biggest part of it for me personally was just my clients I was working on. That being
Mm.
said, I think you can translate that into more practical advice of just using what is in front of you or available to you. If you have a job where you can work with data, you
Yes.
have those tools kind of chosen for
Okay.
you. If you don't have a job
Okay.
that can work with data, but like your job does have data folks, you can work with them. And if you don't have that job, but you really want to grow into it, there's data all over the internet. And I probably spent 3 to 5 years of my life when I wanted to transition into this industry and had
Mm.
no idea what the job title was, no idea how to even do it. I would just find
Yeah.
the simplest, silliest things in my life to automate. So I had a house I lived in for a couple years where there was 4 roommates. Every week we randomly got assigned chores from a Python script that I wrote.
Get out of here.
The benefit of this is like, oh, now it's not your fault you have to do the dishes every week. It just got
Oh my
randomly assigned,
gosh.
but it also gave me the opportunity to experiment with this. So anytime you're in your life and you see something where you're like, a computer could do that better than a person, you can
Mm.
probably automate it. Another example is I was working in a retail store where we were selling goods that were tagged in Japanese yen. So we would
Yeah.
have to print out labels and relabel them in USD. And
Mm.
we were making those labels by hand, copying and pasting in like a Google Sheets. And so I was
Yeah.
like, come on, guys, we don't this takes you 2 hours. We can automate this. And we automated making these CSVs that we could then print out. And all of a sudden, our job got a lot easier, but we're a lot more efficient and we're able to do the things that humans can do best.
Mm.
And so just finding what's in front of you and working with that and improving that will kind of light that flame for you and give you an excuse to learn tools, give you an excuse to encounter common problems and continue to dive deeper and deeper.
This is so nerdy and I love it. Oh my gosh. This is amazing. Like anybody who has an interest could do this. Anybody could identify this. These are maybe to some trivial data problems. The roommate one is hilarious. And yet you started building your chops with Python and that allowed you to eventually learn R and go on
Yeah.
and on. This is really cool.
Yeah.
Why DBT? At what point did DBT enter the chat?
So I think of this in like DBT versions. So I think I
Yes.
started encountering DBT when it was around like 0.15 or 16. So
My.
fairly early. Again, because we were a consulting company, we were consulting with a firm in the Bay Area who kind of, like had their finger to the pulse on like current data tools. Excuse me,
Mm.
and asked us to use DBT. And when I got in there and I went through all the learning courses and I took all the videos and I did the demo and I was like, this is great onboarding material. And I'll never forget kind of the moment it clicked for me. I was like, this is the tool we've been missing. Cause I'd been doing a lot of work in Looker, probably for a year or two at that point. And Looker is a great tool for what it is as like a data consumption layer. But if you don't have
Mm-hmm.
clean data underneath, Looker is not going to be very valuable to you. And they had some features that could help you try to get around it, but it just wasn't able to orchestrate like a large data pipeline, right? And so as soon as I saw like DBT and even their DBT cloud offering and how it can be your orchestrator, I was like, they really found like the gap, and they, I think, solved the problem really elegantly as well.
Wow, how cool. It seems like working at a consultancy checked a lot of boxes for you in terms of discovery, in terms of exposure, maybe even a mental dexterity to the point because you were having to solve such different types of problems.
Yeah, and across industries too. So getting exposure to like kind of the common business problems. A thing
Okay.
that you would hear me say if we worked together is like, well, I'm not a marketing data person, because I've worked with people who are marketing data people, and they have this knowledge of like marketing mechanisms that I totally
Wow.
don't have.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Getting some exposure to that and watching some of those people work really kind of teaches you like this subset of data really is a specialization. Like if you're going to
Wow.
be a marketing data person, you should really focus on learning all those mechanisms. And
Mm.
so getting exposure to like those different types of problems. I also did a lot of work
Mm.
in like some healthcare, some like logistics businesses, some retail,
Dang.
and they ask very different questions and they face
Dang.
very different problems when it comes to curating their data. So it
Yes.
really is I think, a really valuable experience that anyone should get if they're trying to grow their data career. Because again, it just
Yeah.
gives you the opportunity to form opinions on what tools are helpful
Mm.
or not.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. This is super helpful. Okay, so speaking of which, I'd love to nerd out a little bit on a very specific industry, Shopify. We have the luxury in this conversation with Elize of all being familiar with the brand. So I'd love to take a deep dive into, you've been there for a year, I think just over a year now.
Yeah, it was just a year like last week.
Congratulations, 1 year anniversary. That's awesome. But before we go there, we got to get personal.
Okay.
Elise, why do you drink so much iced tea?
But it's delicious. It is the answer.
Not the
Sometimes
best answer.
it's energizing, but it's just it's like water but better.
Oh my gosh.
I was still working in person at the time, and I came in, I was
Yeah.
making some iced tea, and a coworker said, "Are you still doing the iced tea thing?" And I was like, "Oh, it's not a thing. Like, well, this is a lifestyle now." So yeah, it's just my favorite drink. I love it at a restaurant. They have always like some different flavors. I like the cheap stuff. I like the like higher end stuff. It's just always good. I think the one time it's not good is when folks put loads and loads of sugar in it. But even then, sometimes
Interesting.
it's pretty good. So it's just like hard to miss.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How do you feel about hot tea versus iced tea?
I do like hot tea, but to me, hot tea
Okay.
is like a treat, whereas like iced tea is like my everyday beverage.
Okay. For my friends from England who are listening and other countries who partake in the hot tea, they will be happy to know that you enjoy the hot tea as well. Okay, this is cool. So, Elise, let's jump into Shopify a little bit. I have some coworkers and former coworkers who've worked at the brand. I've been a consumer of the brand at times. What are some of the big data challenges that you walked into on day one of this Shopify job?
Yeah. Okay. So some of the big challenges really are around using DBT at scale.
Okay.
So there's a very large DBT project, and there's some very, very large data sets, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so just how do you keep things like the balance of like centralized versus living with their team is a
Mm-hmm.
huge challenge. And how do you find consistent definitions to distribute kind of like as company-wide vetted answers to questions?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
those sound really simple and maybe like the kind of thing that at a smaller company you can knock out in like a few months. But at the scale of Shopify, it is an
Yes.
ongoing challenge that requires constant work. And I say that in like the best way, right? I think
Yes.
there's some people doing some really cool things that really show that they're invested in the quality of the data products being put
Mm-hmm.
out. Personally, that is something that makes me just like really lights me up. I think it's very easy in data to sacrifice quality or make the choice to like underscore quality in terms of like momentum. And I think that there is a huge emphasis on quality that it makes me really proud to put my work out, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, that makes me wonder about the whole issue of data trust and governance. And by the way, who are your internal stakeholders? What departments are you interfacing with?
So I personally sit on our kind of centralized analytics engineering team, which is
Okay.
divided up into maybe 12 or 15 what are called domains, basically kind of
Wow.
associated with business areas. And then any given domain will work with one to a few more embedded teams that sit with the
Mm-hmm.
actual business functions.
Wow.
And so we kind of go back and forth. So my specific one is looking at infrastructure. So I look at a lot of data sets around like how much GCP usage is happening, like database performance metrics for
Mm-hmm.
production databases, as well as, and this is the part that I love the most, the metadata around our data project. So
Of
the types of things
course.
you might want to look at if you're considering
The
like,
matrix code.
should my DBT model be materialized as a table or as an
Yes.
incremental table?
Yes.
We don't need to ask that as a question. Like data can tell us, right? And so that type of data, which is actually the type of data I love to work with the most. So I think I got really fortunate in my placement.
I wonder then, with that in mind, Elise, I'm glad you laid that out for us. A lot of data professionals end up interfacing with stakeholders who are maybe much less technical. I'm wondering whether your stakeholders are a bit more technical. What's the balance there?
That's a great question. So they're more technical in the sense that they tend to be engineers, like software
Mm-hmm.
engineers, but they don't usually have really strong like data stack literacy, which is okay. That's why I'm there, right?
Okay, okay,
So
okay.
those tend to be our stakeholders, but also we usually have kind of an embedded data engineer who either sits between me and the stakeholders, or we're kind of all sitting in the room together. So it just
Mm-hmm.
depends on
Mm-hmm.
maybe the specific project. And
Yes.
then on the flip side, when it is like the metadata about our data project that we're working with, the stakeholders really are kind of like the senior leadership within the data engineering org or even the wider data org.
Got it.
They might want to ask questions about like, we have these several GCP projects, like how is data consumption between them, that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is fascinating. This is fascinating. Okay, so I'm intimidated by the scale of work, the work that you must be doing at a company like Shopify, and it almost makes me feel like, okay, with more scale comes potentially more risk when things go wrong, when the plumbing gets blocked up or breaks. Have you had any data disasters, not necessarily at Shopify now, but across your career that maybe you could illustrate? And the reason I'm asking is because, let's be honest, people see you on LinkedIn, they see you in these communities, they see the job title, they're like, she's a rock star. I couldn't be that. Everything she touches is good. We want the dirt, Elise.
Okay.
We want some of the data disasters.
Yeah, I break things often. I think I break things more than a lot of people, and not necessarily like to say like, the saying move fast, break things. I think it is more just like there was a lesson to be learned here and I'll try to learn that. But the thing that really kind of strikes me is like, it really felt like a disaster. Any folks who are DBT developers will know sometimes you can throw a little something in the wrong spot and you can break your whole project compilation. And so
Mm,
there was a time where I shipped a feature on a Friday, which some folks are probably shaking their head just at hearing that. So that was my first mistake. And I watched it merge and I thought everything was good. And then I stepped out for lunch and I came back and I had shipped some code that stopped our entire DBT project from compiling.
oh, snap.
And to kind of like add to this, you know, it's a Friday afternoon and our company is
Mm,
mostly East Coast based. I'm West Coast. So like already everyone is pretty much
oh,
logged. And then to just even add to that, I was the individual on support that week. So it really was me, the single point of failure. I
sheesh.
was super fortunate. One of my coworkers who lived just like one time zone before me was still online. We paired, we got the bad code rolled back. I learned a couple valuable lessons, but that one
Ha! A
that like
couple.
there's a DBT prefix required for like get relation, but not for load relation. And that's what broke everything. And so now that's like burned into my head. And
Wow.
yeah, but we were fortunate. We reversed it. We didn't break everything over the weekend, but that was definitely the kind of thing that could be really bad for these large data sets that are kind of running through the
Yes.
weekend. It would have stopped all of them, like 100% of the central project. So that was probably my disaster.
That's a big one.
It was pretty bad.
That is a big one. That is a big one.
It
I've
definitely
done some.
one of those things you look at like your biometric watch and you're like, that's the moment I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love to ask also related to that, Elise, how you maybe think about debugging a pipeline or a model when everything seems to be going wrong. This seems like a fairly unique case, and you outlined what the actual problem was. But in general, how do you tend to approach these problems when it's not readily apparent where the problem is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this is just where knowing your stack and having a really deep understanding of your tool set can enable you to move much more quickly. Knowing, if you're working in Airflow, for example, and Airflow is your orchestrator, and you need to know exactly like what those output logs might look like. And then you can kind of take that information and start to work backwards to find the source of your issue. When everything seems to be going wrong, it usually can just kind of like you can go back 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, and just validate every expectation that would cause things to move smoothly until you find where your expectations aren't being met. And then usually figuring out how to, in some sort of retro, encode that as tests so those changes can't happen in the future.
Right. I love that approach. I had asked Elise like right before the call. I was like, Elise, I thought of one new question that I really want to ask you, but I don't want to throw a grenade in there if you're not going to be able to catch it. Elise was like, fire away, hit me. So Elise, potentially related to this whole theme of data disasters, it's the interview question. If there's one thing we've all been through, it's tough interviews. And a lot of times we're well prepared, but everybody has that one question that they got hit with where you're like, my God, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to have words come out of my mouth. Do you remember, Elise, maybe some tough interview questions that you faced in the data space and how you actually tackled it?
Yeah. When you sent me that question, I was like, oh, I have like six just in my head. I feel like almost every interview process tends to have at least one of these. And for me personally, it tends to be like the Python portion.
Really?
Not necessarily because of like a skill set or anything, but I feel like just like Python tends to be the language where they administer the interview, where they really want to know what's going on inside your head. So it's more like that tends to be the choice for that flavor of interview rather than it being Python specific. But I was asked a question when interviewing for a job that I did get in the end that was asking you to recreate some functionality from Spark. And I don't even know Spark. So I see that and I'm like, okay, so first off, I don't even know what we're trying to recreate. And then second off, like at this point in time in my career, it had been probably 2 or 3 months since I touched Python. So I was just kind of feeling rusty, if that makes sense. Like I'd been reading it a lot, but not writing it.
Yeah.
And so it was really challenging. But so I think like my thoughts on these types of interview questions is you just have to like, the first thing you have to do is just take a giant deep breath. Right? We are animals, our nervous system, like this is something we want. And this is now all of a sudden we feel like, oh, I'm in a situation where I don't feel confident. Your nervous system is going crazy. So the first thing you got to do is just like regulate it, right? You just got to take a deep breath or two and say this to the person interviewing you, right? Like, oh, okay, I can solve this. We can do this together. But first I'm going to take a deep breath and really just showing that you're dedicated to solving a problem, I think is more important than the actual mechanisms you get there. A thing I have learned over these several interviews is I think the technical literacy is important and you are being evaluated for it, but really what they want to see is how you face something that you might not be familiar with. Because this is something we encounter in our jobs all the time. Someone throws a new technology at you, you get moved to a new business area, all of us, all that comfort and familiarity is gone. But you still need to know how to execute. And so I think that that's actually the environment they try to recreate in these interviews. And so my strategy has kind of just become like, it doesn't matter what answer we land on. It matters the journey we take together. And so the advice, like from all the interview books and websites in this, is just think out loud. And I think it's finally hit for me why that's so important, is because they want to see that, yes, okay, your nervous system is firing off. You're uncomfortable. You don't know what you're talking about because you haven't done this type of work, but you're able to face the problem and you're able to ask the right questions to start to understand how can we break down the problem. And even maybe if you just get like 1 out of like 3 or 6 steps they want to see, if you get that step and you feel confident in it and you've shown the person who's interviewing you how you decided to take that approach, I think that that's what they're evaluating you for anyway.
Woo, man. So what you're saying is my starting to talk instantly and like trying to stall until the words start to make sense is maybe not the best approach. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about like having the conversation, right? So I do remember like the last time I did one of these, someone threw this question at me and I was like, I don't know Spark. So I'm just going to take a deep breath. Okay, the first thing I'm going to look up is like, what is this function in Spark doing? And then we're off and you can just kind of have a conversation from there.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Sage advice, sage wisdom. This is great. Okay. You stressed me out enough, Elize. We need to move to some happy thoughts. I need to go to a happy place. So, Elize, you've worked on lots of big projects, lots of wonderful projects, especially the roommate one, just classic. But could you tell us a story of a project you're proud of?
Yeah, this actually, when I was looking through your questions, this was the one that I thought was the most challenging because there's a lot of projects I'm really proud of. But the things that I tend to be most proud of are the things that are useful. So when we see high user adoption, that to me is something that boosts pride. So the things that comes down to for me tend to be about, like, at least in the last few years of my career, tend to be about our usage of our data. So we can understand this specific model, like the data volume has grown dramatically and it's worth revisiting how how the SQL is written, how it's orchestrated, maybe how much data is getting rebuilt at any given time so that we can be more efficient, but also better serve the end users and the consumption of the data. Really, these projects tend to be around like metadata on our data project because that has been where my focus has been for the last couple of years, but really anything where there's high utility, I always leave with like a huge sense of pride because we can't build things in a vacuum. I think there's like a joke within our industry. Someone has a very urgent dashboard request and then you can see, like we can see how much you're using these dashboards and it has like 3 views, right? So I think that there's a few things you can learn from that, which is if you really serve someone's purpose, if you really meet their request and solve it, that tool will become essential for them in their day-to-day work. And those views will skyrocket. So anything around understanding how we can get our users actually using the things we built for them really makes me proud. And it's been like kind of across my career that I've had these experiences. So even in my, when I was working in biotech, I automated kind of my original job in producing directions for a pipetting machine. And that was like so fantastic. I'm my own end user in this case, but we use that every day going forward for 3 years, right? And it saved us hours of our time and it was more effective. So yeah, that was a really challenging question because I don't know that I could pick just one, but I tend to feel that sense of pride around utilization is kind of the...
Man, that's so good, Elize. And it's an area that a lot of data professionals are struggling with, particularly when it comes to measuring the impact, the business impact of their work. Few would argue that the work data professionals are doing is essential and valuable. When it comes to, sometimes we've got to be able to toot our own horn. You've talked about utility, level of utilization, certainly as one marker. But in general, how are you thinking about measuring business impact?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest. I'm thinking about that being a manager's job, right? This is one thing I think about me that comes from having worked in like service industry type jobs previously, like really understanding the boundaries of your role. And where I have always sat, at least up until now, is not really setting that like long-term strategy, is not really about evaluating the effectiveness of a team or our output or our roadmap. And I do think that that is a lot of the type of stuff that you see managers do. And a good manager should be teaching you how they're doing that so that you can tell how you're being evaluated easily.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is one kind of like hard boundary I would draw. Like as an individual contributor, you should only be aware of how you're being measured, not really setting those metrics. So all that being
Mm.
said, I won't totally skirt around your question. I do think like utilization is for me the biggest thing I want to see, but
Yes.
also efficiency. So when I start a new project, one thing that's really important for me to know is like, how quickly are we going to need this? Like, how often are you, the stakeholder, going to be accessing this so that,
Okay.
let's say this is something they need data every 15 minutes getting updated versus some people are only checking something like once a week, once a month. Understanding those things and making sure that people have the right data at the right time without
Mhm.
needing to ask, I think is another really important way to measure your success kind of as an individual contributor. And
I like it.
we don't
I
tend
like
to
that.
like quantify these things, but they are actually quantifiable is why I think they're helpful as measures.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. I've never heard it put that way. I'll be honest, Elise. But again, I really appreciate your transparency and self-awareness. Like, we can't boil the ocean. We can't necessarily do all things. You've identified where your superpowers are. You're doubling down on that, but you're also partnering with folks who are strong in those other areas and expecting them to hold up their end of the agreement. With that in mind, I like to ask people about key mentors or influences, whether it's a manager or even outside of the organization. Have you had any of these influences throughout your data journey? And if so, what did you learn from them?
Yeah. So I love this question because I think everyone has these people, and it's so important to acknowledge that even the people who we look up to might have these other people who they look up to, right? Like it's kind of a
Mm,
cycle, and it's so important for us to continue to put that energy forward as well.
mm,
That being said, there's a couple of specific individuals, I'm not going to name names for privacy, who I worked with when I was working in biotech. These are the people who taught me SQL, who told me that you don't need like a computer or excuse me, a software engineering degree to be good at building these types of things, who
yes.
like trusted me enough to give me access to my first like databases that I ran queries against. And also
Yes.
like were honest with me when my work was not up to par. And I think that that's a
Wow.
thing that's really difficult to do, especially to do well and in a way that continues to encourage someone. And there were a lot of people when I worked in biotech who were extremely invested in my doing well at that job when they didn't need to
Mm,
be. And it had an extremely big effect on me, both in my literal success and growth of skills, but also in understanding how you can both be a professional but take people along your journey with you, right? Like if you
mm.
are effective and doing well, you're not only going to grow yourself, you're going to grow the people around you. And I think that
Wow.
learning that so early in my career was really pivotal to the philosophy that I bring to work every day. So yeah, they know who they are if they're watching this for sure.
Wow. Wow. I'm a fan of that, Elise. I really appreciate and value not only your placing emphasis on those who came before you and gave you the platform and allowed you to stand on their shoulders, but emphasizing paying that forward
Very,
because you
yeah.
recognize that there's some young seamstress in a university somewhere who's like, will I ever get a data job? And then maybe they'll see this conversation and that might be the spark. That's super special. Folks, I've been very selfish with Elise's time. I was supposed to have let her go like, I don't know, 45 minutes ago or something. This has gone long. So we do have to allow Elise to get back to her important work at Shopify. But Elise, if we could ask one more question as you
Please.
leave, where might you see yourself 5 to 10 years from now? What are some of your data aspirations?
Yeah, that's a really big question, of course. My biggest aspiration that I would like to see in 5 years, in 10 years, is continuing to focus on the community part of data and
Mm,
participating in it more heavily and more consistently.
mm.
I think that that's one of the things, DBT as a tool is really wonderful and delightful to use. But I think the other thing that really cool about being involved in DBT in its early years is the community that sprouted up around it. And that has like grown and changed since, but I do see a lot of other people trying to start to emulate that in smaller places. And I really want to participate in that. Just to kind of, again, like bring people along with you, share like a IC perspective. I think we see a lot of managers talking about this type of work, but not a lot of folks who do the hands-on keyboard work.
Wow.
So just continuing to participate, and not even just like in the data community, but just in like my local community as well. I think those are my goals right now.
Sheesh. I tell you what, I think she delivered. She's a data engineer who crafts delectable data sets across industries, across tech stacks. If your roommates have a data problem, Elize, she'll solve it. Senior data engineer at Shopify. What a distinct pleasure. Elize Papineau, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was super fun.
Thank you again. We really appreciate it. We'll see you around in the communities. And folks, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. This show is brought to you by DBT. DBT is the industry standard for data transformation. It allows your team to prepare data for analysis in a way that's centralized, modular, and entirely open, all inside your cloud data platform. The outcome? Consistently dependable analytics for your organization. Now, the DBT community was built for and by data pros. Come hang out and transform with 70,000 of the brightest analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists in the world. With DBT, you transform your data. With the DBT community, you transform your data career.